Well, he was my patient many, many years ago in the hospital, and he seemed to be without a forwarding address. So we brought him home for what we thought was going to be a short time, and eventually he was just there and never went.
So I was burned in a house fire when I was 6 weeks old. It was September 1st, 1992, and the fire happened in a mobile home. My biological parents had 5 kids at the time, ages 4, 3, 2, 1, and 6 weeks old, and they decided to leave all 5 of us home alone unsupervised. My 4-year-old brother decided to play with a lighter. He lit some curtains on fire. I was in an infant seat. The curtains fell on me, lit me and the mobile home on fire. The kids all got out of the mobile home and left me inside it.
He was 6 weeks old, and his airway was so tiny and so damaged that they couldn't put an airway in there. He went to the operating room and spent hours there. And usually, when somebody goes to the OR and you don't hear anything about them for many, many hours, it's usually not a good sign. And we were looking up statistics for a 6-week-old infant of his weight, which was approximately 7 pounds, surviving a 43% total body surface area burn, and there were none. Now, this was 30 years ago, but there were none. So every day, you'd come to work and you would just see his name that he was still there. And for about more than 3 months, less than 4 months, he was in a medically induced coma. The days just went on and on and on. But then he was awake and being handled, and everything that had a burn intervention done on it became something that he didn't want you to touch. So there was his mouth, his eyes, his hands, and he had a feeding tube, so he didn't want to be on his stomach. And it was just unfathomable that an infant would have to go through that. And the fire seemed to have landed right on the front of his skull, burned through the cranial bone, and took part of both frontal lobes of his brain. That has since filled in with fluid, like a fluid-filled cyst. They took his hair off the back of his head, swung it around to the front, because there was no bone or anything covering his brain. That was just exposed. There was a lot of people who were very, very, very invested in helping him get through this and survive this. And he was his own best cheerleader because he was in it to win it. And somebody up there had a bigger idea in mind for him, because every limitation that they set for him, he exceeded. Everything they told us he would never do, he's done 10 times more. For 4 months, his mother came twice, and his father did not come at all. We see, at big trauma level 1 hospitals and teaching hospitals, you see a lot of unfortunate children in unfortunate situations, sometimes born with a syndrome where they have multiple issues. And I guess I just never thought about it, but somebody always comes forward for these kids. And we talked about it being time for there to be some sort of planning, and clearly he could not go back to where he was. And we just kind of all thought, yeah, somebody will come forward. Somebody always comes forward. And nobody was coming forward for him. So they were going to put him in a pediatric nursing home in Rockford, Illinois. And my youngest at the time would have been, well, when he came home, Jake was 9 months old and he was 5.5. So we were just kind of in baby mode anyway. And I talked to the kids about it, and my husband is a respiratory therapist, so he also knew Jeff. The whole hospital knew Jeff. We just decided it was something that between the two of us, because he did have respiratory issues, and we just figured there probably were not two better qualified people. We talked about it as a family, and we said, here's this little kid, and he doesn't have active parents. And what would you guys think if we brought him home? And they were like, bring him on in. We'll share our toys. And they had questions like, why doesn't he have parents? And, different questions. It wasn't like something I always thought I would do in life. It was just kind of being at a specific place at a specific time and having the ability to come forward. Not forever. It was just supposed to be temporary, but yeah, you were about a year and a half, year and 8 months maybe when the adoption went through.
I've had 90 reconstructive surgeries,
93.
93 reconstructive surgeries in my life, and they were all before the age of 18. So I had very many throughout my childhood. And my childhood was basically, living a normal life, but then every so often going into the hospital and having some kind of surgery. When it comes to growing up with this family, it was just, trying to be a normal kid, going to school. And at the time, I, didn't know anything different. And I just tried to live my life as any other kid did.
He was a very busy boy, but you couldn't help but admire his fortitude. Even when he got angry, it just made him stronger, and more resigned to, getting through all this.
I always knew about, what happened to me, and we've had that open conversation, but I don't ever really remember learning about that when I was a kid. But my parents and my other siblings have always been super supportive of me.
I think in the younger years, other children were simply afraid of him and more toward upper elementary school and middle school, kids were just cruel.
I remember when I was in fourth grade, I went and drank out of a water fountain, and the kid behind me said, I don't want to drink out of that water fountain after that monster did. And that, that's no fun, being called a monster at school. I'd spend a lot of time playing with my siblings. My two brothers and I would play with Lego sets and build Legos. It felt like every single weekend. I think we probably had Legos all over the house. It was probably never ending. I've had a lot of challenges through my life, but I consider myself the lucky one because I've had a safe and caring household. I've gotten to grow up and go to school. I believe none of the people from my biological family went to college, and only a handful of them ever graduated from high school. So I believe the environment probably would have been worse off for me had this never happened. This fire happened and I was adopted out of that household, but the rest of the kids, unfortunately, were raised in that kind of environment. And, it just makes me hope that things got better for them over time.
I just think he's amazing. I mean, I've been in the emergency room with burn surgeons who have had to have a conversation with a badly burned patient where they, in great detail, explain what they're going to have to go through and how long it's going to take. And they ask them straight out, do you want to live? And I've been there when people have said no. And I myself thought, if I was ever burned like that, I would say, let me go. It's just the most painful injury that a human could ever undergo.
I got to attend our Wisconsin burn camp as a camper from the ages of 6 to 17. And then I got to come back as a counselor, and you get to see all the kids that are going through a lot of the same situations and problems that I've had. And when you rely on people a lot for help growing up, or just in general, you start to realize how important that help is to other people. And I think the people that don't really require that kind of support don't really realize what that means to the people that need it. I came into contact with Common Voices by doing fundraisers for my local burn camp. And with looping me in with Common Voices, it gave me an outlet and an opportunity to go around and make a bigger impact. So I have gone to Washington, D.C. I've gotten to speak to staffers of different senators on legislation going through about fire sprinklers. I have also gotten to speak at the National Fire NFSA National Fire Sprinkler Association's national conference when it was in Florida. Fire sprinklers in houses could save a lot of lives. My fire happened in a mobile home, but it could easily have happened in a house. It could have happened anywhere. The fire sprinklers give people the opportunity to stop those fires before it happens. There's a lot of different ways that fires can start in houses, and not only can fire sprinklers protect property, but more importantly, they can protect life, and that's what matters. Things are replaceable, but people are not.
Fire sprinklers would have prevented what happened to Jeff from happening to him or any other child.